the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca. Let's start with the Maya. The Maya were around from about 300 to 900 BC. They built great cities with pyramids, large gathering areas, temples, houses for the elite in places like Tikal, Copan, and Palenque. You can still see the ruins of these cities of those cities today. They had a very accurate calendar that consisted of 365 days. They used their calendar to help inform them of when to plant, when to hunt, when to have rituals, and all sorts of other things. They collected their glyphs in things called codices or a codex. A codex is a collection of those glyphs put together. That's how we learn a lot about the Maya and the Aztec, because they did have a written language that's been deciphered. So we can get a decent amount of history about these guys from their codices. They're also very skilled artists. Some of the art is still very renowned, still very popular in that area of the world today. One of the things they built that you can still see today in sculpture are these things called stela or stellae. They're large monuments carved out of stone, usually in tribute to a king of the area. And there are lots of inscriptions, Maya inscriptions using the glyphs on these stela. They were great astronomers. They're great at predicting eclipses and other events. And the Maya just were generally a really advanced people. But let's move on to the Aztec. First of all, the Aztec were around 1325 to about 1519. That's a long time. They built their capital city of Tenochtitlan on a lake. That's a big feat in itself. Their city was no small city either. It housed hundreds of thousands of people and had pyramids and trade centers and meeting areas and all sorts of things. And all of this built on a lake. Mexico City's location today is in the same location that Tenochtitlan was way back then. In the floating city, they had to develop a system of farming, and they used what are called chinampas. Those are raised floating gardens that worked really well. They did require schooling for all children. Their language, Nahuatl, we can see some of those words in our words today, or at least the roots of those words. Words like chili, avocado, chocolate, coyote, guacamole, and more. The Aztecs had millions of people in their empire at their height. Now, moving on to our last, the Inca. The Inca were located in South America. They were around from 1100 to 1500. They lived in the Andes Mountains. Their empire was about 2,500 miles long, stretching through 4 modern-day countries: Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile. They had at their height 12 million people in their empire. I said before they lived in and around the Andes Mountains. That was a feat in itself. These are very, very tall mountains. They built cities at the top of these mountains. Cities like Machu Picchu, where they had to carry stones from the base of the mountain to the top of the mountain. They would carve these stones so intricately that the stones would fit together like a puzzle, and they built pyramids, temples, walls, all sorts of things that you can still see today. If you went to Machu Picchu today, these stone structures are still there. They built a vast system of roads that covered their empire. These roads stretched about 14,000 miles from Quito to Chile. Their entire empire stretched about 750,000 square miles. They built aqueducts and canals to carry water from one place to another. They also had people known as chasquis. These chasquis were responsible to run messages back and forth throughout the empire. They did not have a written language, so the chasquis had to remember whatever the message was, run it to the next chasquis, pass that message on, and so on and so forth. They did use things called quipus these were necklaces with knots tied in different areas to help keep track of trade and things like that. They also had a very fierce and disciplined army. So there you go. There's the battle between the Aztec, the Maya, and the Inca. Which do you think was the most advanced?